you guys have the YouTube link, we should be going live in about 20 seconds. There's a slight delay when we start now. Oh, I hear my voice now, so annoying.
Sometimes I feel like that.
You guys have the YouTube link. Yeah, so switch off the video, don't watch it so
Yes.
that we don't distract ourselves with the audio coming from there.
Okay.
For like some technical stuff, right? Because we're doing a Zoom call, there's a chance that any of our internet connection might go like a bit wonky. So if that happens, if that happens, if our internet connection goes a bit wonky and stuff like that, right? We'll wait for you a bit, but if not, we'll just move on. Because we've had too many calls where people's internet connection is not very strong. We just wait for them for like 5 whole minutes and nothing happens.
Okay.
So we'll avoid that. In the meantime, if there's any unnecessary noise and all that, I'll mute you guys lah, in case you forget to do so yourself. At the same time, be sure to check if you are speaking and then whether you got unmute yourself yet. Okay. Right, so it's 4 o'clock now, so we'll start. Hi everyone. If you are here, you are pretty much here for a panel discussion to better understand the industry of arts and design. So this panel will run from 4 o'clock to 5:30 p.m. and will largely be on Zoom. Most of you should be watching this on YouTube or YouTube Live or whatever, right? And then you can kind of put in comments and questions there if you want. Then let me do some quick introductions. My name is Louis, and I'll be moderating the session today, kind of like facilitating the conversation. I run this organization called Praxium. We largely help students, youth to discover what they want to do for their careers. So if any of you are interested, you can look for us on Praxium SG on Instagram. We're also on Facebook, but I'm pretty sure none of you young people use Facebook, so Instagram will do fine. I'll talk more about our organization later on, but we are basically working on this panel discussion series partnered with SGExams. If you are here, you most likely have already heard about SGExams. So they're a youth community started purely by students themselves. There's about 35,000 students, I think, on the platform, and they're across platforms like Reddit, Telegram, Discord, and so on. We noticed that one of the most common conversations were around careers, what to do next, what to study, which is why our organization Praxium, with our expertise in different careers and in helping with making these decisions, we decided to step in to really support the community in providing this content. Okay, so perhaps we'll start by introducing our panelists as well as participants. Let's start in reverse order. Perhaps we can start with the students first. Who are the students? A bit more about yourselves and what drew you to join our session today. Perhaps you can start with Nikki since you joined earlier.
Okay, sure. Hi, my name is Nikki, and I am a pre-U student, so I'm waiting to enter university. I'm probably gonna be attending art school in America, and I've been interested in art since forever, since I was a kid lah. And what really kind of drew me to join this panel discussion today was I wanted to know about more insights on the career.
Yeah, anything can happen. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I had a different tab. Yeah, so what actually drew me to, like I was saying, what actually drew me to join this panel discussion was I wanted to know about career insights about, from someone who's actually in the industry, because I have found that actually Singapore has seen many rising designers and a lot of youth who are really interested in art, but I haven't really seen any professionals in a sense who are really in the field that I am specifically interested in, which is more niche. And I just wanted to know maybe if there are, if it's really as what it seems from the outside, or is there like more to know from someone who is in the industry? Yeah.
Thanks for that. How about Kat?
Hi, my name is Catalina, but Kat for short. I'm studying in secondary Sec 5, and I am interested in interior designing. My reason for joining this this Zoom call today was because I saw the posters and I see some very recognizable names, and I thought that was really reliable. So I decided to join and see where this goes, and have a couple of my questions answered. Sorry, I'm really nervous right now.
It's okay. Don't worry, we're all very chill. Don't worry about this, especially if you're gonna go into the arts and all that, right? How you say, gotta get a bit used to people seeing you and just voicing out, I guess. But what do I know, right? Okay. Anyone else wants? Okay. Maybe Shemei, you want to go next?
Yeah, I just want to say you're not the only one who's very nervous. We look older, but we're also very nervous. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Xuemei. I work in the theatre industry. Maybe recently we are more known because of all the troubles that the arts sector is facing because of the whole COVID thing. Yeah, I work in a local theatre company called Drama Box. Our office is actually in Chinatown. But of course, right now, none of us are back in the office working. We are all at our own homes. And hopefully today I get to share a little bit more about specifically what I do as a theatre practitioner / artist, but also maybe in general, whatever I know about the arts industry, maybe that would be more relevant to, I don't know whether Nikki's curiosity, is in that area. If I can, I'll share as much as I can. And for Kat, well, if anything, feel free to check in with me as well, like regarding arts, theatre.
As a quick sense, like what was your schooling life like, just so that we all can anchor, so you're not like a foreign.
Oh, my schooling life. So I'm in a way, I guess, like most Singaporeans, nothing out of ordinary. Like I didn't quit school in between or anything. I was very much. In fact, when I was younger, I actually followed it without thinking too much about it. So for the young people out there, if you feel like, oh no, you're already too late to consider what you want to do in life or what, don't be afraid, because I wasn't really thinking about it as well. Even when I applied for my course in mass comm in uni, I think I was more following my friends rather than really knowing that, okay, this is my passion. It's not so. I kind of, went to study mass comm in uni. And then after that, I actually went into trailer editing in MediaCorp for 2 years. So I think maybe I've edited trailers with Jean inside before, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, so I went into that for 2 years. And then, but during that period of time, actually since my uni days, I've also started to dabble in theatre with a youth wing. And after I decided, okay, I can't do both, trailer editing as well as theatre, then I decided to focus on one. So I went into theatre and concentrate on my art making. So that's my kind of like journey.
Yeah, and thanks for that reassurance, because I mean, it's never too late to start thinking and start making decisions. But at the same time, we're also doing this so that if you decide you want to start earlier, that you have some resource to tap on. And the other really amazing point that's really like, as part of introductions you're already learning, right, is that transitions and making job changes is very possible. She didn't like do theatre right from the onset. She went into other stuff as well. But let's move on. How about Jean?
Hi, my name is Jean, and I started acting when I was 6, and then I moved on to do music later on. So I am also in an a cappella band. I also release my own music, and I do some acting on the side. It's really like just 3 things, but also I feel the same with what Xuemei said, that there's a lot of twisting and turning, because like when I went to school, I went to mass comm in Ngee Ann Poly, and then after that I actually graduated and did creative producing at Chapman University. So, but I didn't do producing. And then when I went out of university, I actually started doing wedding videos for 2 years. And then I hated it. Yeah, so then now I focus a lot. I focus a lot more on music, and even though acting is still my first love, but on the other hand, I'm also starting to look into studying to be a fitness trainer. So then, there's a lot of different things that happen along the way. So that's a little bit more about myself.
And Melissa.
Hi, yeah. Thanks for having me. I don't really know what to focus on because there are a lot of stories in the sort of 16 years, 15, 16 years that I've been working. And before that, so let me start at the beginning, maybe a little bit, very quickly. I always knew I wanted to do art or design of some sort since I was 4 years old. But in those days, art was a bit of like, oh, your parents didn't want you to do it. And I think the only sort of fast forwarding, the only place you could do that in Singapore, design in a sense, was art or design was like either NAFA or Temasek Poly. And so I went through sort of primary school, secondary school. I did O-level art. And it wasn't an AAP school, but I, on the strength of my portfolio, got into NJ and did AAP and A-level art. So then I kind of didn't see the progression to go to poly from GC, although I think now that is possible and it shouldn't be sort of disregarded. But I chose the A-level route, and then that took me to applying for foundation courses in the UK because there was no such thing in Singapore. There was literally NUS architecture at university level, and that was it. There was no design courses at university level. So it brought me overseas, and I was in the UK for 11 years studying and working before having to come back and serve a Design Singapore scholarship bond. So at the time, it was quite demoralizing because I had to quit my work back in the UK to come back to Singapore. And the industry around 2010, 2011 was quite not as vibrant as it is now. And UX and things like experience design was still in its sort of infancy. So fast forward a few years, and even though I started doing interior architecture, things around the built environment, I've now transitioned into what you could call innovation design, and a lot of more digital experiences rather than physical built environmental experiences.
Okay, cool. Thanks everyone for the introduction. You'll see, I think this is a common thread that there'll be a lot of twists and turns in this area of work. At some point later on, I'll share a little bit about why this is the case from a careers perspective. But let's perhaps move on to the next segment of our discussion, right? And what we really want to look at is how do we make sense of arts and design? Because I think we all come in with a preconception of what art or design is. I know that as a student, I had certain preconceptions. I thought art was pretty much just painting and drawing, or like at most acting. I thought design was just making nice pictures and graphics. And so I always thought it was like art and design was the same thing. Like it's just making things look nice. But over time, I realized it's not really the case. And I now do some design work in my own work capacity as well. I see the distinctions, but I've realized that what's useful for students is if we can kind of break it down a little bit for them. So in my own little bit of research, I found one way to really talk about art is the idea of the ability, the act of like expressing the authors or the group of authors, if you're in a like company or a group, the imaginative and conceptual ideas, or expressing some of your technical skill so that people can appreciate like the beauty or like the emotions that might be triggered from that. And design, which is what I'm more used to, it's a bit more about planning for how do you solve a certain problem, or how do you create a certain experience or implement a certain process. So those are the two things that I got more familiar with. But rather than talk too much about it, perhaps our panelists, do you guys have your own inputs? There's no sequence. Any of you can start sharing what you think first.
Maybe I'll start first. I guess because at Drama Box, I also align with Drama Box's ethos, right, where we kind of call ourselves a socially engaged theatre company. And that kind of is reflected in our works and the way we do our work. So like, for example, it's always about the social issues surrounding us, about the world that we live in. And then I think in the last 10 years or even more, right, we have also started doing, in a way, we have also started engaging the communities in a deeper way. So for me, I would say that art is not just about, it's not just expression. The expression is one part of it, but then actually the other part of it is asking the questions. So asking the why, asking the questions that people don't want to ask or don't know to ask or didn't think about asking. I think that is the role of artists in our society, and that's something that we constantly revisit. So maybe I'll start with that first.
So I just took quick notes, right? And I just added what you said onto our chart here. And there's a little bit about engaging audiences in public and social issues and getting audiences to ask themselves important questions as well, if I got you correctly. Yeah, sure, cool. I really like that. Anyone else wants to have an input on this? Or maybe Jean, since you're kind of also in the arts team, right?
I feel like Shami said it really well, actually. But yeah, I think I guess when it comes to, for me, one of the things that I thought about when I was looking at the graphic is how you know, when you're designing something, you also need to understand the art behind designing it. So like for example, like, you know, when it comes to songs and music and all that, like there's a definite understanding of like a structure, and once you know all these like sort of concepts or theories, you're able to express yourself even better with your art.
So I guess what you're sharing is really that it's not just purely I just say it and like express what I want to express, but it's really like applying some form of like structure or framework, things that you learn over time so that you can better engage your audience as well. Cool, thanks for that. Just adding that in, but maybe Mel, do you want to share something in terms of what you think about art and design?
I think that there are so many different sort of flavors of what you could do within art and design. So you could be much more in tune with sort of creative expression, or other people might be interested in the problem solving and challenge of helping people with their problems, designing to make life better and things like that. So I guess in my experience, I've done a bit of both, where really before design thinking came about as a specialized framework, designers were sort of beauty makers, or what they would call aesthetics. And that in itself was, you know, I love that, and the creative process. And then you kind of mesh that with something that's a bit more strategic. And then you're hoping to tap on both, like ideally you would want something that is beautiful and creative and expressive, and at the same time like meeting clients or users' needs. So that's what I always kind of strive for. And a lot of the time it's not always possible to fulfill all these requirements. Then something also has to have prioritization. And then it depends on the client or the user, what's the most important thing to them.
Okay, cool. So I kind of like caught a few notes from there, and this is a picture that I have. I think the few points that you mentioned were like making life better, trying to deal with, and I see that's like where the link with what Shimei shared really comes in, where in arts we really get people to ask important questions, and in design we kind of like have to be handling how to deal with some of these things. Then there's really a part about meeting clients' needs as well as a designer. Any other points we want to add to this? Because this is for now an okay place to start the rest of our discussion on. Anything else you want to round out the understanding of what arts is and what design is?
Maybe I'll just chip in one more thing where I think arts is really also about offering or opening up another way of seeing and understanding the world and life. And I think for me personally, in my journey, it has been very important to constantly remind myself about this. Yeah, because you can have so many ideas, right? But how do you eventually decide, which is the one that is worth pursuing, which is the one that is important to do, not just for myself, but for the people around me, right? Then I think this is an important question that I usually ask myself also.
Nice. And I think that's really presenting that different way to look at things seems to be something that's quite closely linked to that getting audience to ask themselves questions. It's like show you this thing or approach that you probably have not thought about before. That then triggers you to think about stuff. Take action. Cool.
I do also think that, like, I just want to add one more thing about how I think for me, something that would make me notice art or design is something that is relatable to me. So like when it comes to creating art or like a character or or a piece of music, like something that would attract people to it is something that they can relate to or they can understand or empathize with.
I think that's a really good point.
Maybe I can also add one more point, is that for me, my practice and design is a lot about exploration, arts and design. Exploration, experimentation, so not necessarily always going down the beaten path, but what else can you get out of it? What is a different perspective? What have we thought about joining the past and the future? That sort of thing.
Okay. And I think this is where we really start to see some overlap and like similarities, where I think perhaps the thought process, the approach, and how you do your work might be very similar, but I think it's just the end outcome might display itself a bit differently. And I think it's also why even for all our panelists, they find themselves like toggling between arts and design in their own work as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I think it would be nice for me to say something too from a perspective of a student. Arts is also one platform for students to balance out the stress level that they have in school. It encourages the students to get their creative juices flowing, and I think it's even enjoyable to a majority of people, be it whether they are an autistic person or more of like leaning towards educational. And yeah, I agree with the making life better part. It improves the quality of life for others when you are passionate about this. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's a very good point. And I perhaps it's a point that the professionals and working adults in this group can take a note from, right? Have some therapy for yourself and enjoy your work also, which I'm sure you do. Nice. I think perhaps as we kind of came out with these points, right? What might be nice as a flip side to this is to dispel some of these misconceptions. So art isn't just about painting, because all these other points are more critical. I think I know my own student perspective when I was younger is art is about the paint, it's about the film, it's about the medium. But based on what you guys are talking about, the medium's just the medium. The point of the art is not the medium, it's the outcome, the message, it's the goal. So I think that's a very nice place to land it. And design is something where it's a lot more about like problem solving, making things better, trying to help someone with something. So I think that's something that helps for myself. Hopefully it's helpful for students as well. Okay, I'm gonna move on a little bit. So I don't want to go too much into this. We're gonna cover a little bit of this, but perhaps instead of going down the list, right? Perhaps can I invite you guys one by one? Perhaps we can start with Jean to share with us what do you do at work? What are some tasks that you perform? What are some responsibilities that you have? What's your life like?
So in terms of acting or singing?
Anything, whichever one you feel might be relevant.
Wow, okay. Okay, I will talk a bit about my music because it's what I've been been focused on recently. So when it comes to music, there's a lot of writing involved, a lot of sharing your work with other musicians or like producers that you may want to work with. There's a lot of like listening to what you've written and editing the lyrics and all that. So I think like when it comes to wanting to become a better musician, not just you don't just have to listen to music out there because to sort of like have a better understanding of what people put out. You also need to read a lot, need to understand the language and poetry and how to say things in a concise manner that will also impact the people who are listening to your songs. So other than that, when it comes to the production stage, you're talking to producers, you're trying to find a producer who can give you the kind of sound that you're looking for. And, you know, there are lots of different producers out there. So it's important to know which ones are the ones that will help you the best. And I think in that way, it's also related to acting because, you know, as an actor, when you go for auditions, there's a lot of, oh, what if I don't get this role? But at the same time, like when it comes to a piece of work, different actors bring different things to the table. So when I look for producers, it's also the same thing. I spend a lot of time in the recording studio, just recording using my voice. So that also boils down to practicing how to sing, practicing my technique and all that. And then there's also marketing and distribution and royalties and all that, which I'm honestly not very good at. I think when it comes to acting, though, I have a bit more knowledge about it. When it comes to acting, I have to do a lot of research, watch movies, understand why movies are shot a certain way, why this story is done this way, and then think about what kind of characters can bring out whatever that I'm playing the best. And also a lot of discussion, a lot of talking to people, and a lot of working together with people. You can't just like insist on your own direction. It has to be a collaborative effort. And I think that's the biggest thing about singing and acting. Yeah.
Do you happen to have any pictures or like documents and stuff that you deal with on a daily basis that perhaps you can show us just so that we have some concrete sense?
Yes, I do have, let me see, what do I have? I have an audition reel. I'm not sure if that's interesting for you. So basically if I'm acting, right, I go for casting and then I would read the script and I will talk to the director, and sometimes the director would put everything together remotely. So this video that I have, right, I think I'll swear word. Is it okay? Because the script got
Let's just do it. Let's go ahead.
Great. So I went for an audition, and my this director that I casted for, she separately put my character's script read, and the other character's script read together, and then eventually we became the ones who shot the film together. So okay, let me see if I can. Okay, so screen share, right?
Yes. Yes, you can do that.
Right. Okay, let me just try to share my screen.
Can see. Good.
Oh, can see, yeah. Oh my gosh, I don't think it's Okay, how about this? I'll show you my show reel.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, a show reel then. This is my portfolio. How come cannot open? Okay, wait. Let me just come back to this and then I will open up the file on my hard disk. Okay, so I have my portfolio over here and I will share.
Maybe you open the file first, then you share the screen for the file.
Yes, I'm gonna do that. Sorry. Someone else can go first if that's easier, so that we're not just
Sure. Maybe we move on to Shui Mei. Maybe you can talk a little bit about yours.
Okay, sure. So I guess maybe, okay, I don't know, but maybe can I just ask Kat and Nikki, right? Like, how familiar or how unfamiliar are you all with theatre? Like, have you all watched plays in school or what?
I can go first. Okay. Basically, for me, I studied literature all the way from secondary school until JC also. So I guess literature is quite intertwined with theatre in a sense, and I was quite interested in things like literature, theatre, art in general, like as a just a broad scope of art. So in that sense, yes, I have gone for like some plays. I have a few friends interested in musical theatre as well, and sometimes I'll like look at the stuff they're doing or things like that. And I personally have been interested in theatre also, but I think it's a little bit more difficult to enter in a sense that not many places offer theatre, how to say, like a direct and point of entry into the theatre industry. Yeah, and I think that's my experience with theatre. I really do like it, and I try to attend more local plays because I think it's quite nice to see, especially local actors and actresses, and in general like local theatre companies, because I don't know, it's more relatable. It makes you feel like maybe like we do have a shot at making it in the art industry, things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much my experience with theatre. TLDR, I like it, but I wish I could have been exposed to it earlier. I would say I only started to really know more about the local theatre scene when I was towards the later years of my secondary school years, and it's only because I happened to have some friends who were really interested in musical theatre, and I heard about it through them. Yeah.
Kat.
I've actually participated in school theater, but only for like the preparations and stuff. So I was exposed to a whole new world basically then, because there's a theater CCA in my school, but I'm not in it, and I take literature for one of my classes too, and my teacher, she brings us out to theater performances, and so I've seen live and professional performances too, and that's basically what I have.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I would like to add on sorry, that actually I am actually quite interested in theatre because I've actually been doing dance since I was quite young, and I was in the dance CCA as well. Yeah, so I think my passion for both dance and art and literature like kind of intertwined, and it kind of led me to theatre in a sense. So yeah, I think it's quite intertwined, and it's nice in that way that being exposed to one art form can potentially open up doors to many others. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Maybe I will. I mean, as in number one, you're not actually. You don't know. It's not. You're not too late, because even when I was your age, like what late secondary, I didn't even know about the local theatre scene. I was in the school drama CCA, but it was really much the school was our world lah. So we only know that okay, it's us and our play that we want to stage. It was only until when I was in university when I joined the youth wing of Drama Box called Activate. Then I started to realize, oh, in Chinatown, there's a theatre company, and then the theatre company has a youth group, and then, oh, there's local theatre, and there's a scene, oh, there's an industry. So I think I knew about it much later than you. So maybe I'll share a bit about, so like actually like what you all mentioned, right? Some of you have seen the things that happen on stage, right? You all watch the plays and it's on stage. And then when Kat said that she was involved but in the preparation part, actually that is something that we don't really see on the stage, but actually happens around it. And there's another world around the production that we see at the end. So I guess theatre, right, is actually a very collaborative environment to be working in. And there are many different roles and job scopes and different positions that people fill. For myself, I primarily am a director theater, as well as I create my own projects. Why I so for so long, right? It's also because I don't really do like theater also. I'll show some photos later, then you will understand why, you know, in a way, it's kind of becoming more and more multidisciplinary with Drama Box and the work that we do. Of course, for some of the other companies in Singapore, there are still the companies who are really doing theater, you know, in terms of like, you know, crafting the plays, you know, writing well-made plays, staging it. Like what you said, you know, some companies, they do musical theaters and they do it very well. At Drama Box, we are a little bit more of, you know, doing a lot of things. So maybe I'll show some photos, right? That's easier for me to kind of like explain. Okay, y'all can see, right?
Yep, it's good.
Okay, so this is like the kind of like theater that I was talking about lah, right? This was in Esplanade. Actually, this was a piece that I did for secondary school students. So schools to bring students out to watch show. And this is also, you know, another kind of play that we did in a kind of theater space. The thing about theater space is that it's a very controlled space, right? So if you look at theater, right, actually it's made up of, you can already see a few components here, right? Now in theater, we also use projection, multimedia. So we have people who are making videos. We work with video, or what we call multimedia designers. We have actors, and then the costumes that the actors wear needs design. So we have costume designers. They need to be lit. So we have lighting designers. And then in terms of the experience, we also have to consider the sonic aspects of it. So we also have sound designers. So in a way, right, actually earlier on when we look at the overlaps of design and arts, in theater, it is especially prominent. I'm not sure about in the other disciplines, in the other arts discipline, but at least within theater, it's really, really something that we are very used to, like, you know, working with different designers in different areas. Then I also want to echo like something that Jean talked about, right? Where in a way, I also find myself, my journey is kind of like, I didn't have any formal theater training at all, right? When I joined the youth group, it was kind of like it's a youth group more than a youth theater training class. So we were kind of, you know, we learned some kind of basic acting principles, techniques, but it's not so that we can become good actors. But it's more for understanding how theater works, right? So in a way, I never consider myself to have formal theater training. So there's a lot of things that we learn learn from doing. So I think at Drama Box, we like to say that, you know, there is this thing where we do and then we reflect and then we do again. So it's this circular process, right? And right now, actually, I mean, I also start learning a lot of other things like, you know, cutting hair and stuff. So my point is that being an artist, for me, I realized that in a way, like what Jane said, right, we watch films and we watch maybe a lot of different types of films, a lot of different genres. We listen to music, we listen to things, we read news, we catch up on things. We have to also study philosophy, sociology, psychology, you know, all these different things are all part of our art making process. And then I will quickly show some photos of what I mean by we don't just do theater, and it's quite hard to describe, right? Essentially, my journey in Drama Box has brought me to meet different people at different places. And in a way, theater really is happening all around, right? So this is a neighborhood in Bukit Ho Swee, and this man that we are talking to is a cobbler. So what we do a lot is, when I said earlier about how we go out to engage communities on issues, right? I think this is one way that we are also doing it, where we interview people, talk to them. And eventually, actually, he also became part of our performance. So these are like our test audience, right? This is a full dress rehearsal thing. And then he was sharing his own story. And actually, he also dances. So he became part of our performance together. I mean, some of the other things that we do, because of how we want to engage these people, right, is beyond theater. So for example, like this 2D map that you see here, we work with a graphic designer to do it. It's a map of the neighborhood, and we are just simply, you know, asking them where and how do they spend their day around their neighborhood. So it's kind of like a mapping exercise. And if you go and Google mapping, you know, cultural mapping, right, then that actually also links you to what do you call that? Like maybe social scientists, right? Social scientists also adopt some of these strategies. So actually in the work that we do at Dramabox, right, we find that we are increasingly borrowing from different disciplines as well and working with the people from different disciplines. So that's one thing that I wanted to bring up. But eventually our input is in terms of is how we use these different creative ways, right, to gather voices and gather stories and putting them into what we know best, which is performances or experiences for audiences. And these audiences can be people from the community, or they can also be members of the public. So for example, let's say these are this thing that we did, right? It's more related to what I said about how we talk about social issues. There were a few projects that we did that is about land contestation, or this idea of like, your houses being taken away, residents being evicted from their homes because of certain government policies or decisions, right? So I think this is one, I don't know whether you all know about Dakota Crescent for the students. Yeah, but this is one of the oldest housing estates still remaining in Singapore, built by the British. And when it was announced that the residents are to be evicted, we also wanted to do a project there. So that's what we did, right? So same thing, we went down and, talk to different people, meet with them, find out how they're feeling about this announcement and things like that. But the difference is that if I was a researcher, all these things I would put into maybe a paper, right, or a recommendation thing. But because we do arts, I think what we want to do is to humanize these stories, right? So you see the people and not just the statistics or not just the analysis of it, but how do all these things come to become more human? What are the emotions that words are not able to cover, right? We cover them through the arts and performance. So this is, we borrow the residence balcony to do our performance. And then we get to do things like that, right? Project things onto a housing estate block. Yeah, so some photos of the project in the neighborhood. The next thing that I wanted to talk about actually is a bit more crossing into architecture also. We worked, my colleague, she was the one who came up with this idea, right, of the inflatable theatre. And then she worked with her architect friends to design it. And we built it. It was launched in 2015. This is an open field next to Serangoon. Now, if you go there, right, it's no more. It's become a condo showroom thing, permanent condo showroom thing. Although now I don't know how many people are going to buy showroom, but okay, anyway. So, yes, so we also do this kind of like what I call public space interventions, right? So we don't want to just be inside a theatre discussing intimate issues, but we also want to bring issues outside and having conversations with residents or people who may not on their own buy tickets to watch a theatre performance. And that's a lot of what we do as well. Maybe to show you, okay, so this is what it looks like inside. The other part of our work, actually we work a lot of young people also. In the past few years, maybe less so, but increasingly we're going to do more of it as well. This group, actually, they are from Singapore Poly. They are from the Applied Diploma of Applied, DADP, Applied Psychology and Drama, okay? So they are from DADP, and they did forum theatre plays about issues that they wanted to address. So this piece was about teenage pregnancy, and then we got them to come and perform during one of our forum theatre festivals. Forum theatre is a kind of theatre lah. I won't go too much into detail, but basically, we work with young people and they get to also present their plays, and they did this in our inflatable theatre. Okay, so the last bit, right? I think I also want to. So those are things that you see as the outcome, right? Like the final production. I want to talk a bit more about like how things happen. So actually, this person, right? She is a spatial designer, but she also teaches at Nanyang Poly. So we've worked with her for the entire design, the spatial design and setup. So I think earlier on Melissa talked about how design or spatial design involves a lot about thinking how people interact with spaces, how spaces shape the way people behave, right? This is what she did, and this is what she does. And then what she did for our program was to design the entire experience around it. So all these little installations that you see happening around, right? They are all her as well as her students' ideas, and they set it up as well. And this guy here, he's actually a theatre actor, but then for this project that we did, right? He came to volunteer to be our front of house. So front of house is the person who is like something like usher, right? Something like volunteer to guide the audience and let them know what's going on here, what programs, what to look out for. So in a way, I wanted to just share this because I wanted to also say that theatre, at least in Singapore, there is a community, right? And it's not just a profession, I would say. It is a community that we are trying to sustain, right? Trying to keep this community spirit where, it's not, I only do what my job requires me to do kind of thing. Yeah, so a lot of work that goes behind the theatre, especially when we do outdoor things. There was a heavy rain. Apparently the inflatable theatre floated for 1 meter away or something like that. I think there was a huge thunderstorm. So early in the morning, you see these banners, right, all torn down, the umbrellas, obviously not for sheltering rain and stuff. So we were cleaning up in the morning. Yeah. So just to show you all, how big a team can involve, a production can involve, different kinds of people, all very important. And a lot of these people you don't normally see when you watch the performances. Yeah. So yes. And then the last bit, right? I just wanted to also share some of the things that I really learned from my journey as an artist, right? Is I think these 2 quotes, right? To attempt something futile with a ton of unearned confidence and fail spectacularly. Because a worthy failure is more valuable than a mediocre success. And I think that is something that maybe later we can talk more about. So I think arts is also about, like what Melissa said actually, the idea of experimentation and exploration, which doesn't always mean success. Yeah. Okay, finish. Thank you.
Thanks for that sharing. Just we gotta be mindful of time, so we're moving into our second half of our timing already. So maybe Melissa, do you want to share a little bit more about your own work as well?
Okay. Let me. Can I share screen?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, cool. This is kind of the cover of what I use to explain some of the work that I have done before and may not be doing now, but hopefully it's not too choppy an experience as I bring you through some of the things that I have done before and what I'm doing currently. One thing about what I wanted to share was that the focus of my work has been very different in different stages of life, I guess. And I guess I always felt that I was a bit of a experience junkie or design junkie. I just wanted to do everything. And on hindsight, that was okay. But at some point, you kind of need to just decide on something and make sure that you're happy doing that. And I guess that came to me maybe in the last 5 years, so like mid-30s. So all through it, I think I love the idea of telling stories and creating experiences, whether it's temporary experiences or I think most of my work would be sort of long-term experiencing of a place or an interior down to wayfinding and signage that was quite sort of enthusiastic and passionate about for a while. And then now into digital experiences. And a lot of the experiences, whether you're creating physical environments or digital environments, they're what I call embodied. So a person is there experiencing it through either their own making or a curated experience by a designer. So I just wanted to show some of the roles and designations I've had in the past. I think I've got more than like I've worked for more than 10 companies throughout my life, which is quite a lot, I think, in comparison to most people. And just wanting to share that I think this is the current job I've been the longest in, which is like coming up to 3 years. It's really about, I guess, the exploration and experimental mindset was my own approach to my career as well. And I followed sort of my interests rather than, oh, what would make me the most money or the most limelight and things like that. And you just, I was, for a lot of my 20s, I was flowing from like, oh, this interesting thing to another interesting thing. And I guess that culminated in quite a multidisciplinary approach to what creating experiences could be, and also how to help, how to lead and nurture a multidisciplinary team as well.
I think just to chip in on that, many different job titles, right? Although it might seem like a lot, and I don't know if you're a student who looks at this and feels like, oh, there's so many different jobs, what do each of them require of me? My sense is that across each job, the skill sets are very overlapping and transferable. So it's not about the job title, it's more about the skill sets that you bring along with you. Is that like valid?
Yeah, definitely. There are certain differences when you're designing a physical space and a digital space. The technical abilities and capabilities that you need are different training, depending on the output or the deliverable that you have to deliver. But actually a lot of what they call design thinking or design mindset has fundamental principles. And I think all the people on the panel have I've been nodding to their experiences because there's overlap in what you try to achieve, how you try to bring people in, how you think and empathize with your customer or your user, or a Singapore citizen in transacting with the government, which is a lot of what the people I work for do now. And so there are different sort of angles to it, but there are certain different, certain principles you learn along the way, and things you stand for and things you believe in. So one thing that this idea about making life better, and also something that an ex-colleague once told me that stuck with me, is that you hold your user in high regard. You hold your audience or your client in high regard. So you don't think of them as stupid. You have to work with them and work for them. So very quickly, I started out life as an interior designer, and this is one of the projects that I did in the UK. I worked for a company that did the design for showrooms for Aston Martin across the world. It looks really beautiful here, but this is pretty much what I did day in and day out. You do the plans, you do the specs, you learn to do a lot of the technical stuff, and almost like the grind day in and day out. So we might be working on 30 different layouts for the 30 different sites at any one month, but you're just churning out these plans, and each little specification was checked and rechecked. And so this is the type of sort of work I started out doing, and I learned a lot very quickly. And then I went to do my master's in advanced architectural studies, and actually I applied for the wrong course. I always thought that you would, from interior architecture, you would move into Masters of Architecture and continue building spaces and buildings. And actually I chanced upon this course that was 1 year shorter than the other masters, and that it gave me a Masters of Science. And it was a research master's. I didn't do any drawing or any creative things for 1 year. And I wrote like 6 research papers, but it used technology to analyze space, the social logic of space. And so when I did something like this, and sometimes when we went on internships, your job was to, like, this is a map of London, your job was to draw the lines to make this map, and that's where you started out. So that was a crash course, and also sociology, geography, how that relates to the spaces that we create, and how the spaces that we create in turn affect our lifestyle and our culture. So that was sort of a one-year experience for me. And then let me try to go to the next. Out of that, after that, I've had nothing to do with my master's. I haven't done any work like that since. But what it did give me an experience to do was go into retail development master planning. So this is a Google map of an area called Sadia Island. So it still looks like desert. And I worked on this project in 2008. So there's there's long timelines to some of these development projects, and you have to be patient, and you have to see whether what you did in 2008 actually is, down the line through developers, through construction, actually becomes what you had envisaged it to become. So in architecture, in urban design, your time scales are 3, 5, 10 years, and that might link to engineering as well. I had a colleague once who worked on the Circle Line in Singapore, and he started work on the Circle Line when he joined. And then I think at the time when I was working with him, he got his 10-year company reward type of thing, long service award. So this is the kind of thing that I used to do, which is very it involves maths because you have to look at the square meterage and all that, but actually it's just addition, division. For myself, I had to also move away because I didn't have, and I didn't want to do maths at A levels. So it's a prerequisite to get into university here, but it's not to some of other universities overseas if people get the chance to do that. So architecture and urban analysis, and it was more of a social experience. What I wanted to do is create experiences for people. And architecture and interior architecture was my medium. So here we're looking at, planning a whole town that previously is just like that. And in fact, it's still like that. And you can see though that some roads have been built in the way that you had all the urban designers I was working with had imagined. So this is a project that occupied about 3 years of my life, from planning the master plan to what a journey through a park might be. So I wanted to show this because before I even discovered what user experience was in a digital sense, or design thinking, I was already doing some sort of mapping, but I just didn't, it just wasn't called the term that we use it in different industries now. But as you say, the same way of looking at things is like, oh, in order to design an experience, what do you have to do to try to understand it, was part of my practice a long time ago. And this is one of the buildings. So we moved from like master plan down to each individual plot. Like what would each plot do, and what would people be experiencing in the shops, in the restaurants, in this place that could house 150,000 residents and twice the amount of people working and visiting a day. Another thing I used to do, and this was for all the past stuff about Sadia Island, was for a company called Portland, and we specialized in creating experiences at different levels in terms of retail and branding. So this was a shopping mall in Berlin, and my role was the architecture side of it, the creating the tenancy mix, creating the mood board of what the different zones would look like. So it had a bit more branding, a combination of both technical spatial skills, but also imagination, like what were the public spaces and the art inside the public spaces going to link back to what the brand promise of the development. So that was a bit of destination branding, wayfinding, sort of how do you know that when you arrived at this building, you had arrived at a place and you understood what the place stood for and what you can identify with. Then I had to come back to Singapore. and I had to leave all that fun behind. And I was quite upset with it at first because it was at the time where the economy wasn't doing so well. So I had a perfectly well-paying job, and I had to come back and serve the bond at which my master's was granted the sort of bursary and scholarship for. And I joined the company, I've joined a few companies, but then I found myself at Experience, Ong and Ong Experience Design. And this was a unit that no longer exists, but was helmed by two directors who started the practice that created, excuse me, that created Frank by OCBC. And it was a new way to experience banking. And that was the philosophy, using design thinking, using experience, using research to come up with a more like, you don't just go in to buy a product or it's not functional. You go in to do certain things to socialize or there are certain strategies about what was physical and what was emotional. So we did a lot of interesting things, a lot of prototyping. We mocked up different what we call prototypes and service prototypes. So we this is an instance where we gave people roles of customers and they would come in with different orders and we'll try to break the service flow. So this is kind of the work that transitioned me into just designing things and spaces to designing processes and services for people. And the fun stuff that we used to be able to do is when we did a project for a client who wanted to create a better sandwich kiosk experience, is that we went around town to try out all the sandwiches. But I guess one of my colleagues got like gluten intolerance after that, so it's not always a good thing to do. But then that's part of the understanding where the brand fits and where the design fits. And we created a physical and a digital experience for that. That also took me to designing key experiences in a school. And we used a lot of the same processes and methodology in service design to think about what people are experiencing, how might we include technology into a school experience, a canteen experience. This was a space that we didn't come up with and we weren't scoped for at the beginning, but through our insights and interviews and talking to people, one of the groups of stakeholders in the project were parents, because parents will drop off and pick off their children from school. And one mother said that, I hang out in the cafe because I picked one kid from junior school at this time and another kid from senior school at this time. And I actually really enjoy the 2 hours I have with the younger one going through homework and having a bit of alone time, because having two children, you have to divide your time. And that time was special. So we designed an area to cater to those instances where mothers or parents and their younger ones could have some quality time, which would otherwise just be waiting time. And a lot of the time, our best spaces came out of those type of insights, like, we could do something for them. And that would sort of brighten their day, things like that. And then we did some wayfinding and signage as well. So I think at some point I wanted to break out of just designing spaces. And I thought, how can I break into sort of things that I was seeing a couple of years ago were very exciting, like innovation and designing around rituals, designing around culture. And I don't know whether it was luck or whether you make your own luck, but I started to work for a few small projects, like for DBS, for Unilever, around brainstorming and helping them see some new ways of working and the future of work and things like that. How there's not a design output in that sense. But you're trying to change culture. You're trying to change the way people behave. This is something that is using a design methodology and framework to say, look, what are the problems that you have in your work culture? And this project that we see on screen now started off as a project on productivity, but one thing that the stakeholders themselves ideated about was that, oh, we don't have enough good food options, so we're always like having to go home early, so we're a bit sort of not very happy in that aspect. So they ideated about food trucks and actually prototyped a canteen or snack kiosk experience during the time that we had with them. And they actually earned money on the day because they were selling snacks to their colleagues who didn't have this previously. So from something like productivity, you get an F&B solution. And that was really about innovation, because you wouldn't thought you would land there when you started. And then that brought me to coming to the Government Digital Services Department at GovTech. And with Louis, we were working on what a good experience, learning experience might be with technology for students and teachers. And I think this is really interesting now because with the circuit breaker and with home-based learning coming in, it has changed our landscape completely. Some of the work that we did future casting a year ago is no longer relevant. And I think that's quite exciting. So just very quickly, we sort of create these prototypes in, whether there are toolkits or different ways to share our learning. And actually, what we do now is more like this, like our ideas, our sort of insights into research on the ground. And we come up with things like the classroom is a weather system of spheres of influence and things like that, to almost like make stakeholders see things differently, and maybe to get a different perspective so that they can land on a next step, or they can actually move out of getting stuck within an idea. And so we create a lot of insights. One of the things that I've been doing in the past few weeks is, let me just,
We're running short on time, so maybe you can like finish up soon.
Yeah. We've been putting out these Medium articles. So very interestingly,
I think you need to switch the screen share because you're showing your slides only.
Okay. Yeah. So what we've been doing is writing articles about what we learn when we do our research. And I'm working with a team that's creating these illustrations and writing these points of view, or tightening the narrative around what the research has shown us. And in a way, I never thought that the skill that I would need the most at the moment was like concise writing skills. But that's kind of what I do most, like this week. Most of this week has been about what I have in terms of synthesizing data and research into something that people want to read about and might be helpful for parents and teachers to know about what's been happening with their students and children. So that's kind of my experience and what I've been doing now. So you can see that it's so different from where I started, where it's about a lot more visual representation, drawing, and then looking at the 3D world around us, down to like what's happening on our screens, and how actually even what's happening on your screen is part of a lived experience.
Cool, thanks for that. And I just want to make sure we don't miss Jean, right? Because she was trying to show us something just now. So, Jean, does it work now? Like, are you able to share that now? And we're running a bit short on time, so we can do it quick, quick one.
Okay, I guess I'll just focus on maybe acting. Because I have more stuff. Okay, let me screen share. Okay. So as an actor, okay, can we see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, thank God. Okay, great. All right. Okay, so as an actor, I find that there's a lot of instances where I have to put myself in very uncomfortable situations. So the one over here is an army show that I recently aired on MeWatch, and one thing about it is that we have to put ourselves in situations where it's really uncomfortable to wear the number 4 all the time, and like there's the forest and the mosquitoes and stuff like that. So I guess, you know, because in every different kind of career, you will have your own form of inconveniences. So my form of inconvenience is just all these uncomfortable situations, and also being vulnerable, and also subjecting myself to the risk of injuries because I'm also a stunt actor. So this is just really a lot of mosquitoes. And then for this one, it's a dragon boat show. And this scene, when I did it, I actually injured myself on my muscle. Can you see my mouse? I don't know whether you can see my mouse. But
yeah.
Okay. So my muscle here actually tore halfway through the scene. And as an actor, you don't really get to, the unfortunate thing is that you don't really get to say that, oh, I'm injured. Can I not do this shot? Like, it's not always going to be like that for you. So you're going to have to grit your teeth and go through that. But honestly, I think for me, the satisfaction of seeing the scene after that is something that is worth it for me lah. So this is sort of like the behind the scenes. This is the driver, and we have a fight scene. So I was actually just one of the stunt actors, and this is what happens before you do the fight scene. 3, 2, 1, action. So this is the choreography. It's quite funny, but yeah. So this is what you do. You just do a rehearsal of sorts. That's the best way, because like you don't want to go on set and not be prepared. So sometimes like people do rehearsals before the scene. Sometimes they don't. But for fight scenes, generally we try to do the rehearsals first. So this is the actual scene. Yeah, so like, I mean, yeah, that's great. So, you know, you always want to try to be legit. And I think that is my responsibility as an actor, to really just try to learn the craft. And whatever character that I'm playing, I try my best to understand the character, move like the character. So I think it's important if you're playing an underground fighter, for example, in this scenario, it's best as an actor to go and learn how to fight like an underground fighter. So this is another scene that I did. It's a stunt scene, and I had to be knocked down by a van. So this is the rehearsal. Okay, apparently there's no sound. So yeah, so that's how the scene is supposed to be. We had to rehearse this a few times. And for stunt, you will want to have reinsurance. Yes, and you don't want to injure yourself halfway through production, because like you're gonna end up, you know, delaying the production and all that stuff. So taking care of yourself is very important. So this is how the shot turned out. So that's me. So for this scene, it's like, you know, it's a big scene, and I guess everybody have to learn how to work together, because like you can't do the scene over and over again, as you can tell, because every time you take a new shot, it's like resetting, and then like the stunt actor has to do the whole thing again. So yeah, it's a little bit about like my acting stuff. So yes.
Cool. So I'll go on to close up this particular sharing stuff, and then we'll open up for questions. We're running really short on time.
Yes.
But let me just, I'm just going to skip over all this stuff, right? So these are all just the different domains. If you're worried about anything that's going to be skipped, don't worry. It's going to be covered in an article after the the panel is over, and that article should be out within a week or so. So all these stuff we'll kind of cover there. But I think what's more useful to kind of address here is this perspective that I kind of worked up as I kind of heard everyone speak. And the idea here is really that when we look at art, right, we generally think of artists. When we see designer, we tend to think designer. But as you kind of heard what they talked about, right, what I've done here is basically charted out some of the different things that need to be done for the artist, some of the different things that have to be done for the designer. And for an artist, for example, you would have heard Xie Mei, for example, talk about the need to do some research, engaging with like the Dakota residents on the ground, interviewing the different people that they work with. But there's also like the graphic design. Remember, she mentioned about the poster and that thing. There was also a little bit about set design in terms of the infrastructure, the building of the stage and props and stuff like that, as well as sound. And then there's all the production related stuff like logistics, getting people's times in order and stuff like that. And like what Jean was mentioning, right? Even just rehearsing for like stunts, making sure the shot runs on time. And there's a whole financing part as well. And if you're kind of looking into the art scene, right, there's really a whole spectrum of work that's got to be done in order for that work to happen. From a design angle, this is kind of what I captured. And Melissa did mention something about design research. She did talk about working with software engineers and stuff like that. And all of that is like kind of work within the design industry, just kind of different perspectives that really stems out from there. And this is a framework that we kind of use at Praxium, right, to really make sense of each industry so that we don't have this like very narrow-minded way of looking at it. Because if you want to do arts, doesn't mean you have to be the artist. You can do all these other things as well. And actually, some of these skill sets actually translate down to other industries. Like say, if in healthcare and the arts, if I'm not wrong, Drama Box did some, I think it was something, the end of life one, what was it called again?
Both Sides Now.
Yeah, Both Sides Now. I think they had this production series that engaged people on the need to plan for the last stage of their life. And arts is one way to keep people engaged about health as well. And that's kind of how it plays out when you place it into the healthcare space. And in design, in engineering, there are all the different roles that actually have to play out in the healthcare. And if say you're an artist or a designer, you might actually be involved in some of these domains. If I'm not wrong, one of the team members in Melissa's team used to work at a hospital as a designer. Then when it comes to arts and design, let's say in engineering, if you've ever been to the iLights Festival in Singapore, there's a lot of stuff which is very interactive and electronics based. And it's kind of where engineering and arts kind of collides, and architecture really goes into, say, building construction, that kind of stuff as well. And I wanted to share quickly another set of things in terms of videos. So as an art student myself, one of the things when I was a student, one of the things that I looked into a lot was interactive art and digital art, which is very prominent these days, and it's a hugely growing industry. So this is Nike, for example, and the artists involved would be basically a team of people designed and created this experience where you could kind of interact with this wall, and as you run, they would kind of track how quickly you ran and have these like ghosts kind of running beside you to kind of track yourself. And that's something interesting. And it's kind of also in the realm of art, but much more modern and contemporary. Something else here is also about projection mapping. And I think this is something that Xie Mei mentioned briefly a little bit about, but you can see how it kind of plays out in a dance performance where it's not a video. All of this is dynamically relating to how the actor's body moves as well. So it's not just about having a fancy video and choreographing it in time. It's also about how do you code, how do you design that whole digital interactive experience to match the human being on stage. So that's all also within the realm of art, but much more prevalent these days because of the ease of access of technology. So I think it's worthwhile looking into that as well. I'm gonna stop here to get questions. So finally we get the questions. And I foresee that we're gonna have to extend this by a little bit, about 15 minutes at least. So hope that's okay with everyone. So we'll end properly about 5:45. So perhaps anyone like Nikki or Kat, do you have any questions? And those of you who are in the YouTube stream also, feel free to just drop the questions there and I will relay it to the panelists.
Okay, someone in the YouTube stream actually asked a really good question that I would also like to know. So the person asked, hi, I don't know how to phrase it, but how do you know if you have what it takes to be an architect?
I guess Mel has to answer that.
Yeah, I was just unmuting myself. I guess that's a question for me, but the unhelpful answer is you don't know until you try. And I think there are different ways, now with online courses and access to even some summer programs abroad, that you might be able to see whether you're sort of passionate or interested in that line of work. And also there are different types of architects out there, and they have very different views on what architecture should be. I think for a long time, I would say that architecture in Singapore was the acceptable face of design. It was a profession, and there's a lot of technical aspects to it. But I know architects who are either very conceptual or very technical, and I think that if you want to explore architecture, there's enough out there for you to sort of read about and identify with. Lots of talks where different architects can sort of explain where their inspiration comes from. Definitely, to be an architect, it's you have to go through the training, and I think going through the training will you either love it or you don't, or you can either get through it or you really have to really want it to be able to come out of the training to be a practicing architect. As Louis was also mentioning, there's a lot within the field of architecture that you can get involved with. So it depends what your interest is and why you want to get into architecture. Do you want to create art? Do you want to do it because you want to make life better for the people that live in your buildings, in the built environment? And there are a lot of different ways to get involved with the designing of our built environment, not just building buildings. Even community engagement, the stuff that XueMei does, creates experiences and creates community engagement in our environment. And that's part of perhaps a bit more linked to what architecture does as well.
Something that I happen to know also is that if you want to be an architect in Singapore, there are a couple of different levels. So there's the formal like certified architect kind of stuff, and usually you're quite senior. And that title really is not so much about architecture. It's more about like putting your name down on architectural buildings, so that it's pretty much saying that you as a professional person have checked through that this is safe and this is good to build. That is at a certain level of architecture, but not everyone actually needs to do that to do architectural work. And
that takes more than 7 years of study. Your architecture training itself will take 5 years, and then you have to do additional work to get what they call your part 2 and your part 3. So only when you get your part 3 and you're sort of certified by a body, you can call yourself an architect. So I can't call myself an architect. I didn't go through that because I realized very early that that's not a route I wanted to go down. I didn't need my name on the paper or on the building to get meaning out of my work. And a lot of that type of work is very technical.
And a big part of like architectural work, I think you can do even if you're like in this like part 1, part 2 kind of phase, you still do a lot of it.
Maybe something I can add on as a pre-U student is that actually, I think if you're unsure about being an architect, I actually have some friends who have signed up for things like internships or like short-term work programs to kind of get themselves involved in the industry, but in the end they do decide not to go into architecture as a uni course because so maybe that may be an option if you're looking to experience architecture without committing to it long term.
I think for any studies, right, it's useful to look at how it doesn't lead you just to one job. So Kat, for example, is asking a question in the chat about if you want to do architecture, if you don't succeed in doing architecture, at least you can still do interior design. I can tell you that actually interior design, there are no strict requirements. You can pretty much graduate from, I don't know, like finance and still do interior design. There are plenty of people in the interior design industry who are not certified. There is no certification anyway. There is no formal restriction for you to be an interior designer. So anyone, any like dude can actually go and do that. But having architecture background just gives you a certain lens and perspective. Similarly, I think if you do other fields of work, even if it's theater, even if it's design, it's gonna give you a different perspective on how you do your interior design. And I think there are overlaps there.
I think also Kat's question was this perception that if you do a broad degree, like, well, it can be broad or it can be very technical, but if you do a degree in architecture, it covers you for doing other types of stuff like product design and interior design. It very much depends on, I would say, down to the lecturer that you get. And that will influence how you view what your design practice will be at that point in time. And then, as I said, you keep exploring and experimenting. And I think for me, that was my own parents' advice to me, like, oh, do 3D design, do architecture. I was kind of like, I didn't know whether I wanted to do like fashion or graphics or architecture. And they, maybe because of the risk involved and Singapore being a small market, they said, do architecture, do 3D design, and then that will be sort of broad enough so that you can do other things later on. It set me down a path. There's no way that I went back to fashion design after that. So you have to be aware of the paths that it leads you down. But I do think what I learned in architecture school and design school had a sort of spatial relevance, but it made me think about how people live and how people behave. And that extrapolation then led me to be able to design a lot of other things.
So because I have experience in a few different realms, because I'm doing this career coaching work, I can also share that if you want to like get started in architecture and stuff like that, or you want to get a sense of whether you're suitable for it, one quick thing you can do pretty much is to go online and get attend or enroll yourself in some of those free courses that you might find on Udemy and stuff that have to do with things like 3D modeling and 3D design. That's one part of the work. It's not the entirety of architecture, but you might enjoy that particular part and it will serve you well if you do go into this kind of work. The benefit to this also is that skill set that you pick up in 3D modeling, it could be useful in architecture, but I can promise you that even if you don't want to do architecture or you can't for some reason, you can still go into other fields. So 3D modeling will be useful in, say, things like engineering, as you're trying to build products and all that. When you get a factory to produce a particular part, the ability to 3D model a thing will be a very in-demand skill set. The other thing that you can use it for also is in game design, because virtual worlds, virtual environments, virtual buildings are also buildings. And there's a lot of people who also go into 3D game design, game concept art, game environment development as well. So those are just a few ways to kind of play with it. One of the questions that's coming up is how to find various ways to better build your portfolio. At this point in time, I want to bring us quickly to one of the things that we were originally planning to talk about, but we'll only cover in our article after this. We wanted to at first talk about a few courses of studies that could be relevant, and these were some of the things that came up. But I think before the panel started and as we did our introductions, we got a sense that actually a portfolio matters a lot more. So the portfolio that you build, right, is gonna matter a lot more because in these fields that you're doing, right, the ability for you to perform the work is often more important than your education qualification. And I see Jean and Shemei and Melissa kind of nodding because if I happen to know them well enough, I know that their colleagues all come from different backgrounds and different courses of study as well. And what ends up making the difference is their experience and the kind of stuff that they've been involved in. But perhaps from the various folks, maybe Shemei or Jean, do you have any tips on how to better build your portfolio?
I think for portfolio wise, what I do is to go and look for student films to be in, because like there are lots of really good content as an actor. A lot of student films are exploring certain themes that mostly national TV wouldn't explore, I feel. So that's what I do. I would do all the student films, and then sometimes like there are passion projects as well. Or like if you have an idea, if you want to create your own portfolio, you can write and you can shoot and you can find people. So I think also networking is very important, because like once you find the right people will lead you to all these different opportunities for you to also end up building your portfolio. Yeah.
I guess for theatre, it's a bit dependent also on which area you want to go into. For example, if you are, like I mentioned, there are different job scopes within theatre, right? So let's say from a director's perspective, I feel that, I mean, of course, one way is that, an important skill to develop, I guess, is to be able to create things rather than have people create things for you to do, right? I think that is creativity. The way I understand it is not about fresh approach, but it's about the ability to create. So I think that's how I understand creativity lah. So having that ability to create is very important. So if you can start just initiating your own projects, finding ways to do something out of nothing. And I guess I call it the FYP spirit. So if, I mean, like let's say you all have been to poly, or even in your school, right? Maybe it's kind of like the project work spirit, right? Where you don't need a lot of money, no resources, whatever, but you make something out of nothing. I think that for a start is good training. It's really good training for you to kind of start building your portfolio. The other thing that I feel, maybe taking another angle to look at it, right? Perhaps this is more relevant, at least for me, like in the arts industry, right? I think, and personally, I think the why you want to build it is more important than thinking that you are building it to apply for a job or what. As in the arts industry is really very different, because it's not about getting a job. It's about building that experience. So I would think, if you want to look at it from that angle, maybe it's more helpful. So for example, do you reach out to local companies or artists, find people that you can follow and look up to and learn from if you want to start. I think that is actually how a lot of us start and enter. I think someone mentioned earlier, I don't know whether it was publicly or not, right, that seems like it's very difficult to enter the theatre industry. And I think a lot of the people who really do enter, right, actually a lot of us also don't have formal training, right? And I think it's only because, let's say, we are lucky enough to meet mentors or, follow certain companies and their work. Some of us start out by volunteering for these theatre companies in terms of, when they have productions, we volunteer to be their front of house staff, and then we get to see their work, we get to understand how they work, and we get to know them. So I think this is how you also build a way to understand and, get to know the people inside lah. But it's not about networking. I just want to clarify, it's not about networking and then, building all these networks. It's about building experience lah. Yeah.
I do agree also, because like a lot of it is like you end up meeting all these people, and then you're also running with this idea that you have in your mind, like what is something that is drawing you to all these certain projects, and then somehow or another you just end up looking back and realizing that, oh my gosh, I have this bunch of things now.
Yeah, I completely resonate with what both Jean and Shermie are saying. My own experience is that when I was going through school, even doing at O level and getting and not having AEP or if students in AEP will know, not having that full experience and not getting the grades to get into NJC, which was the only school that offered art at S level for A levels. It was purely based on my portfolio. And then even my own experience, I was not very hardworking for my A levels, basically because I had applied to university with my portfolio. And so like the month before A levels, I already gotten my place in 3 universities. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like follow that. So in the world of I mean, different places will have different requirements, but when it was my experience, I was much more focused on the point of view that my portfolio put across than getting grades, because that was what was getting me into design school, into further education. And it's a better indicator also of your design approach, your point of views, and what Jeremy was saying, you have, it would benefit people to find those people that you admire in the community and do an internship or follow them around or get into conversations, and you find your own art or design voice through that, and it will come across as a more cohesive portfolio because of it.
Just to plug a little bit of promotion, right? So for Praxium, we very much like identify some of these challenges. Like, it's not easy for students to build a portfolio, because from a student perspective, you will just do the work and then you will just showcase your final work. But very often from a professional standpoint, we are looking for a lot more different things as part of your portfolio. So we do run a number of programs which help students to build their portfolio into something that pretty much any employer will look at and they'll be like, oh yeah, this is pretty solid. So I just wanted to screen share something very quickly. This was from a recent run from one of our programs where this couple of students wanted to build this product lah. So we kind of had to do a lot of like work in terms of like charting out what are the different tasks that have to be done. We would do certain things such as identifying some of the factors and users that might be involved, how this might make some money, make some finances, so on and so forth. How does it become a holistic project? Also look into like the design aspect, because they were trying to design an app and that's one of their portfolio projects. So what are the processes, what are the sequences of activities that need to be done? How do they kind of illustrate and talk about this stuff? And there are some of these things which you might do and you might instinctively do, but very often you don't capture the process. And when you don't capture the process, it's not easy to get a sense of how rigorous your work was. So as a quick tip, do add rigor, track every single process of like what you're doing as you build your portfolio. If you're going to do a theater project, vlog or something, blog about like every single day you are doing that project. That's going to help. If you want to, that as a quick free tip lah. But if you don't want to do that, you're like lazy or you don't know what to record, there are certain programs that we run as well, which will take care of all of that for you. Okay, so I think Nikki had a question.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, my question had to do with kind of studying. I think the trend of Singaporean students who are interested in art studying overseas, and I mean, I myself am guilty of that too. Yeah, because I feel like many students in Singapore, to me, what it looks like is the field right now is very much focused on progressing in terms of technology, things like digital landscape in the art industry, and maybe I feel like in the realm of fine art or more niche areas like really like being an artist, things like that. I think maybe Jean or Sherry can probably relate to this more, but I feel like it's not as like harped on as much. And I feel like nowadays what's becoming more common is people going into things like communications design, industrial design, things that are more commercial and really focus on problem solving, which I think is perfectly fine. I mean, it's a great industry as well, but personally I'm really like interested more in the expression side, which I think we covered right at the start of the panel, right? So what do you think of the job opportunities in more niche areas like really like performance art, for example, or things that are generally not as commercial or not really in a sense not as PC, you know, because it's more on like expression of your own thoughts and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can start first, right? I think, okay, firstly, I think, right, actually, I personally don't have an issue with this idea of traveling out, right? Traveling and then going out to see the world. I think, again, if you notice, like my strand is quite consistently about, it's not about what you do only, it's about why you do it. And I think that is a process and journey of finding out for yourself. So if now you don't have the answer, it's fine also. But I think the idea of, you know, traveling out, going out to expose yourself and be open to, you know, different cultures, different experiences, I think that is actually quite important. Personally for me, I've also gained a lot from, let's say this kind of overseas exchange and residencies. I mean, I may not have spent, let's say, for example, 2 years studying abroad, but I have gone on residencies that are like maybe a month or a few weeks. And those kind of exchanges are actually very valuable because you get to see, it opens up the way you see things. And the way you see things is, like I said, very important in your art making, whether or not you are doing something that's more experience building, or whether you are doing something that is more 2D, for example, like really, doing a painting, right? Something that's more niche in that sense. It doesn't matter because it's about the perspective that you bring. So I think these experiences are very valuable. In terms of the industry, whether there is space, for this kind of niche, maybe non-commercial art to develop, right? I can share my limited understanding based on theatre, in the sense that I wouldn't say the kind of theatre that we make, especially at Drama Box, is commercial. A lot of theatre companies, I mean, maybe explaining a bit about the funding, right? That there are, so at National Arts Council actually provides major grant, this thing called major grant funding to companies with track record. Then there's also this other thing about seed grant for companies that are just starting. So the idea of seeding these companies, right? Drama Box is under the major grant company because we've been around for quite some time. But the idea is that in terms of, okay, so within the industry, right, there are people who are full-timers and then there are people who are freelancers. A lot of artists are kind of like freelance artists. And I think most of them, they end up doing two types of things, right? One is their art making and the other is education work. So going into schools to teach. I believe that this going into schools to teach, right, is not just, oh, okay, because I need to make money. I think it's also, of course, definitely got to do with they see the value in, teaching and imparting skills. But I think at the same time, so I think this is in a way how the industry generally works, that freelancers usually take up more than one thing. I would say that your observation about the digitalization actually is quite true because that's in the arts plan, right? But I think the bigger question is, for me, then what is interesting is that will you all stay, right, and question this, okay, question this structure, question these conditions, right? I think that is actually for me the bigger question, that but I think, as in that there is that tension, and especially during this period, I think the conversation has been going on about, the precarity of arts as an industry, how easily and how I mean, we are in a very precarious situation where we are suddenly, like one thing, and then all of us are kind of like, okay, are we going to even survive? Will there even be an industry next year? That kind of thing. But then I think the beauty of it is that because the spirit of art and art making, like I said earlier, right, is all about that, asking questions about, creating something out of nothing. That spirit is the thing that keeps us going. So I think in that same train of thought, right, perhaps the way to look at it is that if you choose to come into the industry, would you stay and shape the industry together with your fellow peers? Some people say it's very difficult to enter the industry. Actually, I think it's more difficult to stay in the industry. So that will be the challenge that we can all embark on together.
Anything for Jean?
I totally agree. It's true. It is tough. I mean, like there's this whole like, are people actually like looking at local art and all that stuff. I do have friends who went overseas, and I have been overseas myself, but not to stay there, but just to experience. And I can tell you, like, it's really a different experience because like the culture overseas is very different. Like in Moscow, you can just be a random bunch of buskers singing a cappella, and then people will just stop and watch the entire gig, the entire set, and that's really great. So then it makes you kind of think of like, why is it different in Singapore? So I guess, if let's say you're staying behind in Singapore, one of the things that I would ask myself as an artist is like, what can I do? What is it about this culture that I can change as an artist. Yeah, and then I do have friends who migrate overseas, but now they're back because of the whole situation. So, I mean, there are things that you can find overseas. At the end of the day, is what do you want for yourself? Like, if you want something that only like people from other countries can give you, then by all means, you know. But if, let's say, changing the whole culture here is something that you want, then also stay behind and do whatever it is.
I'm going to chime in because this was a similar conversation that happened last week during the media segment. And I'm going to reiterate this point that is going to be relevant here as well. If you look at this diagram, right, I'm just going to give a basic framework. So if we just count, every 3 dots will add $1, and every dollar sign we have, right, pretty much might connote how vibrant or how lucrative the particular scene is. So if we talk about the art scene in Singapore, we don't have a lot of dots. So we may not make a lot of money plainly by practicing arts the way we see it. And we might look at migrating or going overseas. And if we look at this, right, if this 1 dot comes over here, we'll have 12 dots here or something, and then we're going to have $4 here and 0 here. So the impact of every one person that migrates has an impact on what you leave behind as well. So like what Xie Mei and Jean said, right, if there really isn't anything wrong with you wanting to go overseas and find greener pastures and work there, but you do have to be aware that it also means that the local scene does not grow whenever someone moves out. Unless you come back at some point, because maybe you come back as, you go there and then you come back and then you are like a bigger dot when you come back, right? Or like a bigger dot when you came back. Then maybe that's worth a bit more. But the question is, do you do that? And the question is, all the artists that you see who have moved out, have they come back and have they shifted the art scene in Singapore? That's a big question you might want to ask. Only if you care about Singapore. If you don't care about Singapore, then I guess go ahead. But here's another thing to a food for thought to ponder about. This plight that we are in, where local youth, local young people have to think about, must I go overseas or should I stay here? But if I stay here, no opportunities. If you want, right, it's a bit entitled, right? But if you want, you can go and blame the previous generations. Why did they migrate? Why they never stay? If they stay, maybe it would have been better. You can do that if you want. But if you do that, just be aware that you have a part to play now if you want to blame people. Because if you go, you're going to be that old person that the next young person is going to blame, in a sense. So you kind of want to play it both sides. There's some role that you have to play as well. So this is just something to keep in mind. Again, if you don't care about Singapore and you're fully entitled to do so, then again, going overseas is completely fine. Just know that for the local scene to grow, people do have to contribute to it. And I know that Xie Mei, for example, the work in Drama Box pretty much pushes that quite strongly. I also want to highlight that. Yeah, anyone?
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, actually, yeah, that's why when I was listening to Xie Mei talk just now, I was kind of, it kind of, in a sense, it did kind of answer my question. Because I think personally, I am quite invested in coming back to Singapore after my studies. So I think, yeah, the work at Drama Box, it was really, I guess something that I didn't know about, actually. So I think, yeah, that was pretty informative.
I also wanted to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
Few like a minute. So I went away and I studied and I worked for 11 years, and I kind of was forced to come back. But actually, definitely for design, the opportunities back in younger industry and culture back here, where it came to maturity in design, the people who were part of the whole scene and community, commercial and otherwise, it puts you on a better footing in a way to have these diverse experiences. So not only like if you really love Singapore, but for yourself as well, to come back getting experience from all over the world, I feel is beneficial as a designer and a practitioner, to see different viewpoints that where in Singapore you might only be exposed to a few. And that brings about a certain diversity in the way you look at things. I think also it's important to pay attention to how you might transition back, how you find your place back in the scene and the culture here. So it's kind of like a bridging of what you take from what you learn overseas, and also how you want to evolve your practice that is authentic to the culture that you're in.
Yeah, so I also wanted to jump in on like Nikki's point. maybe anyone wants to finish, or do you want to share something?
No, I just
before
want to
go
throw in one thing to consider also, right? To open up this idea of like nationality or national boundaries. I think especially right now we are also in a situation where this transnationality thing becomes very prominent, right? As in, for example, especially in the arts, because we are talking about human condition and life, which sometimes can be very universal. It's not just Singaporean communities or localized, right? So I think this idea of like not doing or not practicing in Singapore is not something to feel, I think personally, it's not something to feel ashamed about, or there shouldn't be a negative connotation to it. But I think I go back to the thing about it's very important you know why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so I think that's a nice place for me to transition to where I wanted to talk about also, right? Which is back to this idea, because something that Nikki mentioned just now was about something that's more commercial or something that's more about just expression. So I think actually, right, for Nikki, I wanted to challenge you, and it's not just you, and it's a lot of other students who have this sentiment. And the challenge is when you have this perspective, are you then open to learning or seeing things differently? Because or are you like coming to the panel or hearing from people to validate your own views instead? So I think what I'm trying to share with you here is the idea that there are things you care about and there are things about expression, but then there are also things about relevance and opportunities and things that maybe you don't care about, which may pay the bills lah. So I know that as a student and as a young person who hasn't entered, it's very easy to see things like this lah. So like this, where it's either commercial or expressive, 100% either way. But I urge you to look at it from a third perspective, right, where maybe it's a mix. So for example, Jean, I'm sure you enjoy stunt acting, but I don't know if that was something you initially wanted to go into, but there's definitely opportunity and that's why you kind of jumped into it. And there are a couple of things that will crop up along your lives that maybe you initially weren't interested in, or it doesn't really like for example, like wedding videography or something, right? Like wasn't particularly interesting, but it does have some commercial value to that. And maybe you have a little bit of that, and then you have space to then do everything else. So it's going to be increasingly common to do this nowadays. And as you heard Xue Mei talk about freelancers, plenty of people do this lah. In a certain way, as you hear Xue Mei talk about like education, a lot of freelancers doing education as well, you could also see that the education work is a commercial effort. It could be as well. So one of the things that why this is all really relevant to talk about, right, is the idea that the arts industry, at least what we have, is one that's a little bit erratic. It's not as stable as you might expect. They're not so much like an employee with a stable income. And because of the level of erraticism, right, you do need to keep an eye on what are the opportunities that come your way. And then you might jump around in different areas, which is why Jean also talked about being a fitness instructor, right, earlier on. And how there are opportunities, and how much are you willing to, like, say, tilt your balance? Because for fitness instructor, it actually leads in really nicely to Jean's work in acting and the physicality of it as well. Yeah, if your husband to be like the gym kind, right, really just build bulky muscles kind, I don't know whether that's might be.
I mean,
your
because
cup of
like
tea.
as a stunt actor, it's also important to know physicality. So then I guess in that sense, it ties in all nicely.
So we're about out of time. So I'm so sorry. I think I didn't do a good job managing time this particular session. So we're gonna close up this session already. But please feel free to keep asking questions if you are still on the stream. We do answer these questions after the session in our post-event article as well. So if you see, this was an article that was written for our first panel around engineering, and we pretty much captured some of the post-event questions and kind of embedded it within here as well. And all the content that we covered was here. So if you did miss out the early section, don't worry, we're going to cover all this in a concise, kind of concise way for you to kind of catch up with what you might have missed. This live stream will also still be online if you want to watch the whole thing after this event. We had one for the media industry as well, and we will be doing one for the panel we have for today. So this is the end of today's session. I just want to thank everyone for their time in being with us. I just have a last few set of announcements to make, a little bit of promotion, I guess, as well. So I'm going to share with you first the things, then I'll share with you the feedback form at the end, and I'll paste that into the YouTube chat as well so that you can access the feedback. So again, our organization is Praxium. We pretty much run career-related programs and stuff to help students to better understand what they want to get into and all these insights lah. So if you found anything that I shared helpful, right, you might actually enjoy following us because we do offer content and stuff like that might be helpful for you lah as you plan for your future. So it's like Praxium SG if you look us up on Instagram. Here are some free stuff that you can take advantage of coming up. Our workshop series is halfway through. Basically, this workshop series is a chance for you to hear from more people about how do you prepare yourselves for your future and stuff like that. So there was a session on like asking us anything at all, and it was purely Q&A. There was another session we had about how do you make good decisions, like this school or that school, that kind of stuff. The upcoming one this weekend on Saturday will be one about getting to know yourself. I think if you are someone who are not too sure what your interest is, you don't really know where your passions lie, this particular session might be interesting for you to better get to know yourself and what your interest areas might be. And the last one is about a bit about resume writing tricks and all that. Even if you don't need to write a resume right now, this is still useful because at the end of the day, when you do try to apply for a job or you try to apply for some form of a uni application or scholarship, you would have to write some form of a concise document to show your experience and all that. So this will really be trying to serve that particular function. And if you want to sign up, the link is here. All of this, again, will be pasted into the chat below. So I think someone's doing it right now. I must have an AI guardian angel posting all these links for me. So this is the link for the workshop series. For those of you who want more than just this, right, we actually also have a mentorship program. So if you see the panelists here and our past panelists, pretty much Praxium has a kind of network of professionals across many different industries in any field that you might be interested in. If we don't have, it's our job to go and find for you, to go and find this mentor to match up with you. So the goal of this is really for people between the age of like 16 to 25, basically pretty late secondary all the way up to university. And what we're doing here is we're running a mentorship program where we're going to pair you up and group you with a set of mentors. And you will be able to constantly be asking and checking in with these people about how do you prepare yourselves for your future. This would be really helpful because it's not just these kind of one-off things, right? It's a space for you to have a lot of your personal questions, a lot of your personal doubts, things like, how do I deal with my parents if they don't let me do these things? If I want to prepare my portfolio, what are the things that I can do? Stuff like that. And networking as a concept has come up a number of times during this session and every single past session. And having a mentor is a very easy way for you to build an effective and strong network that will serve you pretty effectively. So even Shemay just now earlier mentioned how if not for the mentorship that she received in Activate and Drama Box and all that, she may not have discovered this calling or this thing that she's working on right now. So mentorship is pretty important and helpful, but it's pretty hard to access, which is why we are trying to open up opportunities for people to receive this. The link to this is here. My guardian angel has also just posted it. So thank you, guardian angel. Yeah, so otherwise, that's about it. This is the links to the feedback form. We also have a Telegram group or channel that you can join, and you get further updates about future panels, future conversations, future events that you all can take part in. So that's all I have in terms of promotions. Yeah. One last thing, if you do follow us, we have a program coming up that will pretty much be something I mentioned halfway through during this panel, where we are working with students to build up something in their portfolio to do a project within a set period of time. So if any of you are ever thinking to do a theater production, any of you want to be an influencer, anyone who wants to build an app, want to run a business or to start your own design consultancy or something, or design a product, any particular thing that you ever want to do, we are running a program that enables you to accomplish those goals. So that will be pretty solid for your portfolio also, if you're interested in that. But I don't have information here. It would do you good to sign up for this particular channel because we would share some of this stuff inside there as well. Yeah. Otherwise, I want to thank all of you, Shemay, Jean, Melissa, Nikki, and Kat for joining us for today. I do know there are 1 or 2 questions in the chat in YouTube that we haven't answered. But again, look forward to the article. Right. So thank you guys very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm gonna end the stream. So stay on until I end the stream. Okay, end stream. Okay, I think it is ended. Okay, that's it.